My name is Sarah Hotchkiss. If you haven't seen me speak before, I see a handful of familiar faces that come regularly. I'm here every other month speaking on a different topic, so it's usually Saturdays around this time. So I'll be here, let's see, March. So in May, I'm speaking on histamine. Histamines, allergies, sinus infections. Just before, with spring, I feel like May is a good time to speak about some of that stuff, because if you have issues with that, that's a lot of times when it's flare, spring and fall, I think, for most people. I'm with Catalyst Wellness Coaching, so my office is downtown in the Studio 107 building with the salon and nails and a handful of things going on there. I also work part-time at the doctor's office, which is a cash pay primary care clinic on the south side, down from where the job center was. So I do that. Recently, starting in the beginning of January, actually, I was recruited to teach and take clients from an online gut health company. So I am just doing that. I only signed a 6-month contract, which I'm happy about because I don't know, I thought I needed a third job. But so I've been doing that on Fridays, and the company's out of the UK. It's called Bold Health, and so they were starting a startup in New York. So all my clients are from New York and New Jersey, which has been interesting, and also the time zone has messed with a lot of appointments. So I've been working with those folks on Fridays, doing the online thing. I've really learned, and I knew this before too, that I really prefer working with people in person than online. It's like Zoom, but it's just like, it's not quite the same. So I'm working with an integrative medical team, working with those patients as well. So we have a GI doc, a dietitian, clinical psychologist, because if you don't know or haven't been through of all this, if you don't already have anxiety and or depressive symptoms, but you have stomach stuff going on, it often causes that because it's hard to deal with kind of day to day. So I'm gonna be straight with you guys and tell you that I am in the middle of my fast for my test tomorrow. So I am testing tomorrow. I'm doing a breath test myself. And so I'm gonna cut us off at like 1 or 1:30 because I'm just eating boiled chicken and water today. So I'm a little like shaky here, but I brought my actual test with me to show you. If you end up ordering the Trio Smart SIBO test, I'm gonna pass the box around so you can look at like what's in it and kind of what it looks like. So I'll run through that all today. We can ask questions as we go, and then I'll do some kind of extra at the end too as well. So I've been here a lot talking about overall digestive, digestion 101, IBS, kind of things like that. And we've talked about low FODMAP a little bit, some foods piece. But really today, in part of why I do this is because I've struggled with this for so long myself personally, and that there was no access to testing 20 years ago when I was going through this. And now you can get some of this through GI, but now as of the first of the year, 2023, you can do it yourself, which is awesome. You'll have somebody interpret it. I can interpret these tests. Your GI doc, depending on who they are or where they go, may or may not be able to interpret these, but I'm gonna give you a couple testing options. If you are interested in ordering one of these and you wanna see if it's covered by your insurance, I have the CPT code too, so I can email that to you, that your doc can use to get that covered, one or both of the tests covered, so that's an option too. There's a third test I'm gonna talk about today too, which I don't have, but I'll just talk about it, but you do need that ordered by a doc. I can order it for you at the clinic also if you need that. So I don't order tests for anybody without doing a full intake and assessment though, and initially figuring out what's going on, because why would you pay $320 for something that maybe you don't need? And that's how much this one is, so it's not cheap. However, if you want to figure out what's going on, sometimes a few $100 is like, you're like, whatever, like, I need to know. The other test that a practitioner has to order is an option too. So I'll go through all 3 of those tests today. I wrote down just the 2 because those are the only ones that really you can order yourself, so you can write those down. There's tons of information on both of those websites. I even printed it out today a little bit on just if you're a good candidate to order either one of those tests. And I'm gonna go through that a little bit today, so you'll have that also. IBS is a chronic digestive disorder, super common, unfortunately, but it often is diagnosed by exclusion, meaning, okay, you don't have gastroparesis, you don't have Barrett's esophagus, you don't have colitis, you don't have Crohn's, you don't have colon cancer, so I guess you have IBS. And then there's not really much to do with it, or a lot of times we don't get a lot of directives on what to do with it. I know I was in and out of the doctor for years, and all they ever said was drink more water and eat more fiber. Both of which I did, and it made me feel worse. So I'm talking with you about that today too, because I think we push water and fiber, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think for the general population, most of us don't drink enough water or eat enough fiber, right? But if you have a digestive disorder, sometimes both of those things can actually make you worse. So when I ate tons more fiber, I went home and ate like cauliflower and like Brussels sprouts and all these like high fiber foods. I never felt worse in my life. And then I drank a whole bunch of water. I tried to push myself to drink a gallon of water, which was like more than my body weight at the time, or ounce per body weight, and it messed with my electrolytes actually. Like that made me feel worse too, like I was dizzy. So more is not always better, with some of those things, more fiber, more water. For the general population, yes, I think more of both those things is probably good. But the type of fiber and like your electrolyte imbalance is kind of a big deal. So, so I'm not gonna ask any of you personally, but like many of you might have been through the GI or maybe working with your GP route on something that doesn't feel right in your stomach, and you probably have not walked away with a lot of like things to do or change, or I think GI and I'd say women's hormones are two things that are like really kind of behind a little bit. Like we just don't know what to do with them, or there's like 3 things that there's suggestions to do, but we're still left with a lot of people just still not feeling great, so not a lot of answers. So there's 3 tests I'm gonna talk about today, 2 primarily. So let me go through kind of the first and maybe like who it's appropriate for and how it might work. So the first is called IBS Smart. And this is appropriate for people who have diarrhea predominant IBS or mixed diarrhea and constipation. If you are just constipation predominant IBS, this test is not for you. This test tests if you have post-infectious IBS from food poisoning, and if that is still in your blood, basically. Most of us, how many people have had food poisoning that they know of? Raise your hand. Yeah, at least a third, right? There's probably another third of you that have had it that you don't know you've had it, because maybe you thought you had the flu for a day, or maybe you got sick, or like whatever. Oh, I ate a little something, it was something a little off. If you don't treat food poisoning, it harbors in your body and messes with your gut microbiome for the rest of your life. So sometimes we don't know we got it, so we didn't treat it. Other times we didn't treat it appropriately or for long enough. Also, so that's one of the big questions I ask people, especially if they come in with like uncontrollable diarrhea. We go through a timeline of like, have they ever had food poisoning? Traveling in another country, and you like travel in another country and you're like, my stomach doesn't feel quite right. That can be a touch of food poisoning. And there's a big spectrum with food poisoning too. You can be a little bit or a lot of it, but it still affects your gut. Some people, depending on their history with antibiotics, depending on their genetics, come back from food poisoning really well, and it's not that big a deal. Others, not so much. So this test is appropriate if you have one of those 2 symptoms in particular. Often people don't know they got food poisoning too if it's maybe not horrible, or like I said, we tend to think like we had the flu or maybe something else, and it can be like food related. I don't know that I have ever had it. About 7 years ago, I have an interesting story. About 7 years ago, I had my whole family doing Whole30. None of them wanted to. We did anyways, and my husband lost so much weight he had to stop. So it was like, so we did Whole30, and on the last day, we didn't do anything processed, it was all Whole Foods, whatever. But on the last day, we went to Jimmy John's, and we all ordered unwitches, because I was like, that's like Whole30-ish, right? I mean, it's like processed lunch meat, but I was like, we'll like celebrate. And so we all got these lettuce wraps, and I can't stand mayonnaise. So I said, just make sure mine doesn't have mayonnaise in it. Well, it comes back with mayonnaise, right? So I was like, I scrape it off. I like really don't like mayonnaise. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make something else. Like, I'm just not gonna have it, or whatever. So out of our family of 4, I was the only one that didn't eat the subs, and it was a good idea because my whole family got sick with food poisoning. Jimmy Johnson. I haven't been back since, actually. I'm sure it was just like a fluke. But, and you don't know, it was lettuce, we don't know what it was, right? And they all ate it. And earlier that day, this is graphic, but earlier that day I had made chili and red velvet cupcakes. And so all of that came up all over our house everywhere. So it started with one of my kids, and then was another one, and then my husband, and then I'm trying to help him clean it up, but I'm not good at that either, and I'm like barfing in between, and I'm not even sick, but I just can't make it. It was horrible. I remember the next day I was still working for social services. I had a huge presentation for our CEO in Milwaukee, and I had to go. I didn't sleep all night, and I just texted them. They tweaked the timing of my presentation. I'm like, look, I've been just cleaning up barf all night, you guys. And I'm coming. I'm gonna make it, And I literally drove into Milwaukee, did that hour-and-a-half presentation, and drove home. I didn't work the rest of the day because I couldn't make it. But yeah, that's an example of how it can take over your whole house. So if you've had it, you've had it. You may have had it and not know, but that's basically what this is testing for. So there's 2 biomarkers that the IBS Smart tests for. It's called anti-CDTB, which you'll see when you go on the website, and anti-vinculin. And so one or both of these might be elevated. If you have IBS-C, so constipation predominant, then these are typically not in your biomarkers. Doesn't mean you couldn't have food poisoning, but they're probably not in your biomarkers. So if you go to the ibssmart.com, the website that I gave you, you'll fill out a symptom profile, you'll order a test, and you'll get then actionable results emailed to you. And you'll be able to do a post-test consult actually with a doctor online there. Or you can take it to your doc and your GI doc if they know something about it and do it. So food poisoning is the leading cause of IBS, diarrhea, predominant or mixed. So that's why getting to the root cause of what's going on. And again, the other thing is you could have food poisoning 10 years ago and it might not even start to majorly change your gut microbiome. You might not even have symptoms till 7 or 8 years later. So it's not right after. You might think you heal and then you forget about it, right? Because you want to forget about it. And then it can come up later. So just something to think about too. That's why I usually like to get the timeline from people. There's also a connection with mono and gut microbiome issues. So especially when I'm working with young people, I ask them, did you have mono in college ever? And there's sometimes a connection there. So just something to think about when you're talking about health history. So if you have either of these conditions, whether or not it's officially diagnosed or not, this might be a good first step for you, so that this test might be appropriate. If your test comes back positive, then there's treatments to target your gut, and we can make a plan and actually do something, but then we know what's going on, we know what's sitting in there. Here's the backup handout. Thank you. Yep. All right, who doesn't have one of these? Kind of the full here, and then why don't you just pass them behind you. If you're a research buff on some of this stuff, like me, the blog that I posted at the beginning of this month, I believe it was March 2nd, has active links to both of these tests and has active links to all the research supporting them. So if that matters to you, because that matters to me, and you want to read all that and look through all that, then that's there's an active link on my blog on that too. So. Any questions on that test? I'll reference it a little bit later again too, but kind of what that is and how you might do that. Oh, cost? Somebody didn't ask me cost. I don't remember. I think it's between $100 and $200 for that one. So, yeah.
What you said Whole 30? What is that?
It's a Whole 30 diet where you just eat whole foods for a month.
Okay.
Yep. And so, which I love, and that's a lot of times where I start people is a diet like that. If they're not complaining of any major chronic digestive issues, if they don't have autoimmune, that's a good place to start for most people. And sometimes that takes care of most people's symptoms. But if you really have something going on, undiagnosed, then it won't. For me, I did Whole 30 and I felt better in some ways, but in other ways I didn't, because there was a lot of cruciferous vegetables in that plant, so that actually made me feel worse. There's cauliflower rice and a lot of Brussels sprouts, And so that kind of did me in. It's interesting going through all, I've done a lot of diets in my life trying to figure this out myself, and each of those diets gave me information. I did sugar detox, like a 21-day sugar detox. I talked about that about maybe 4 or 6 months ago here. And it was funny because, so part of my family did that with me too, but they only made it a week. But I wasn't eating a lot of sugar, so it wasn't a big deal, but I'm like, well, maybe that's my problem, I'm eating too much sugar. I did sugar detox and I felt worse too. Because again, a lot of the cruciferous vegetables, I have an egg allergy and I didn't know at that time. And so I was eating tons of eggs in there too, so I just felt worse. The diet that I felt the best on before I found low FODMAP was actually autoimmune diet, because it takes out nuts and seeds and eggs. And eggs were my issue, one of my food sensitivity issues, but I didn't know at the time. And then I have an issue with almonds, cashews, sunflower seeds, and so you weren't eating. And I remember thinking, wow, like I actually feel decent. I remember there was like a 16-day span. I never felt good for 16 days in a row. I'm like, this is what normal people feel like. And so then when I slowly started adding stuff back in, which is what you're supposed to do, by the way, slowly, one thing at a time, that's when I picked it up, and that's when I picked up the eggs and the nuts and seeds, and then I got a food test anyways, and it confirmed what I kind of already felt. So, the path and the how this all comes about is usually, by the time that I see people, usually they've been dealing with this stuff for 10 plus years. Because they've tried all these things, or they've tried to figure it out, or they don't know exactly, or some days they feel fine, and they're like, I don't know, maybe it's just something I ate, or like, some days are fine, some days are not. So let's talk about the SIBO test a little bit then. So that's the second one. So small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Too much bacteria in your small intestine. We eat food, goes from your mouth to your esophagus, to your stomach, to your small intestine, to your large intestine, and then exits your body, right? So we have lots of bacteria in our large intestine that are supposed to be there, and then they're excreted, and then you start that process all over again. If you have leaky gut issues, or if you have had abdominal surgery, or there's so many different, if you've been on antibiotics for a chunk of time in your life, like on and off for long periods of time, you may have a poor functioning small intestine. If you have extra colon, like super long colon that can get squished in, almost always happens with women over men. IBS cases are 80% more likely in women than men. Some of those bacteria that belong really just in your large intestine back up into your small intestine, and that's what causes, I call it like a big fermentation science project a lot of times, because you like blow up and look 7 months pregnant when you're not. Which is really irritating when you're not pregnant, to like feel and look like you are. But it's an overgrowth of bacteria in your small intestine. It's more common than we think. I think when I was diagnosed with it 20 years ago, no one had heard of it. I had no one to talk about it with. Nobody had any idea. I went to GI, they were, we don't even know what you're talking about, Now we have testing in GI at both Mercy and Dean for SIBO, but only as of a handful of years ago, which is crazy to me. SIBO is the cause of 70% of IBS cases, so that's, we're talking like root cause. So that's why, and so if you have constipation predominant, diarrhea predominant, or mixed, the SIBO test can be good for you. So any of those, whereas the other one was just 2 of the 3. So I could do a whole talk on kind of SIBO and where it comes from, but like I said, it can be from high doses of antibiotics that might have changed your gut microbiome and impacted you later. The feeling of SIBO is not just chronic pain in your stomach and bloating. It affects, it's major brain fog, it's dizziness, it's nausea, and it's extreme fatigue, just like beyond. And so I've always wondered for years, like, why did I get this? And it's really messed with my life for a long time. But I got this, I think, so I can do this today. So I never, I never had to kind of put that together. And I think a lot of times we don't talk about that stuff. And I think when you look at somebody from this, with SIBO from the outside, just like a lot of other hidden chronic diseases, autoimmune is another one, you don't know they have it. You have no idea. And they're like, you look great. Everything's fine. Your blood work is fine. Everything's normal. But you're like, I'm not normal. I feel horrible, right? So, but remember the symptoms of SIBO go well beyond the gut. In fact, those were sometimes the other symptoms were what messed me up, I know, for many days, was the extreme fatigue and the, nausea, for sure. Like, that really can mess you up when you have to, like, travel somewhere but plan time in your day to, like, pull off the freeway and throw up. Like, it's not, and on the regular, like, and after a while, sometimes you live your life like that and you don't realize that other people aren't doing that, that's not a normal thing. So, and so this Trio Smart Kit is for the diagnosis of SIBO. You're probably wondering, why am I taking mine again? Really only a third of SIBO cases are ever treated permanently. So it is a chronic disease for most people, especially methane, sorry. So about 2/3 of the time, it relapses, sometimes within a few months, sometimes years later. I was pretty much SIBO free and like maintaining, not that I didn't have symptoms, but like 90% of the time I felt pretty decent for about 3 years. So last year, I hit menopause and I had histamine issues and all my stuff came back. And so I've been fighting it for probably 9 months again now, back and forth. And so I did 2 rounds of antibiotics last year. I did some herbals, felt mostly better, but I decided to get a baseline for myself of me feeling 50-50 kind of, just to see where it's at, because then I know if I need another run of antibiotics or what I need to do. The prep isn't fun, and that's probably why I didn't want to retest again. So, and it's pricey. Like, I'm not gonna just keep testing myself for $300 and drop $1,000 on 3 tests in 3 months, which you totally could. Because ideally, you're supposed to test yourself, get a diagnosis, go through treatment, and then test again to see where you're at. Especially if you still have symptoms after your treatment, you want to test again. If you feel great, you don't necessarily have to. So, the Trio Smart is a triple breath test. I'm going to go through the gases with you today. This is really sciencey today, so if you're into it. It tests for 3 gases in your intestines: hydrogen, methane, and hydrogen sulfide. To my knowledge, in this county, we don't have a triple breath test available at all. So the ones that they're doing in GI, even the ones that I can get through Ruba Health or at the doctor's office, Dean, they do a double breath test. If you have constipation predominant IBS, that won't matter, because you will not need to test for hydrogen sulfate, because that's probably not your issue. This is really like the gold standard test, and so it sucks if you can't get it covered by insurance, but again, a lot of people are at the point where they're just like, I just want to know. So especially if you have diarrhea, predominant IBS, you really want to see if the hydrogen sulfide is there, and so I hope at some point in the near future that those will be available at sort of our GI departments and local doctor's office, but like I said, it like literally just came out the first of the year. So if any of you want to dig into more about SIBO, I'll give you just kind of 2 names too. So I was trained as a SIBO practitioner by Allison Seebecker, who's a leading researcher on SIBO. I even worked with some of her practitioners years ago myself when I was getting treated, because I couldn't find any help around here. So Allison Seebecker, which I reference in my blog, and Mark Pimentel, who wrote this book, are probably like the 2 go-tos. So if you're looking for more information on some of that stuff. So the triple breath test is great for people who experience bloating, gas, abdominal pain, and fast or slow motility, which we've been talking about. Measures this, the level of the 3 gases. You can actually have more than 1 gas, which I'll go through too. And then data from the test can help treatment protocol. I'm going to talk briefly about the treatment protocol for SIBO today too, so you just have an idea of like what that might look like. So like the IBS Smart one, you'll go in there and complete a full symptom checklist. The test kit looks like this. It's shipped to your home. I'll go through how to go take the test today even. And then you literally ship it back in the same box, and then about a week or so you get results. The way that it works is that you'll be on a limited diet for about 3 days before, and then there's a longish fasting period. Because what we want to do is eradicate all the bacteria in your body before we take the test, so we can get a good baseline. And then you swallow a substance, either glucose or lactulose. Lactulose is preferable, but you have to get a prescription for it, but that's my preference, so if you can get that. When we do glucose testing, it doesn't reach far enough down into the small intestines, so we get some false negative tests. So if that's all you can get, do it. but lactulose would be preferred. Mercy does lactulose, Dean does lactulose now too. So some clinics will do a mixture of lactose and glucose, which is actually even better. But so you'll do a low fermentation diet for 3 days leading up to it. All the handouts are a little different on what it is. And the worse your symptoms, the more you should prep probably. But the idea is to get your gas levels at 0 or close to 0, and then you're gonna swallow a substance that unfortunately will probably make you fairly symptomatic and not feel good, but it's usually only for about 24 hours, so you're gonna wanna be home while you're doing this. So that's why I'm doing the height of my fast prep today, and then because I'm taking my test tomorrow morning, so I can be back to work. I couldn't do this on a normal day because you just don't feel good kind of going into it. But you want to get good, accurate results. You don't want to have a false positive. And the diet for it for the few days leading up to, first of all, you can't have taken antibiotics in the last month for anything. I'll pass this around so you guys can read it too. No antifungals, no herbal antimicrobials like berberine, oregano oil, neem, kind of any of those. Can't have just had a colonoscopy, so it's got to be 2 weeks apart from a colonoscopy or an endoscopy or the colon guard. 1 week before the test, if you are taking any laxatives, Miralax, any stimulants, anything like that, you have to take that out. That sucks. If you're used to kind of taking those, no magnesium citrate. If you're on a prescription, Senna, Dulcolax, none of that. Can't do that for a week leading up to, because that'll affect the test. No probiotics for a week before. No prebiotics for a week before, because that definitely messes with your gas levels. And then, depending on who we are, but a couple days, 48 hours before the test, it's basically boiled chicken, boiled fish. You can do some pork and beef, salt and pepper only. You can do eggs, but not me, so I eat meat all day. Some places will say tofu or white bread. I say no on that because that can affect your gas levels, especially if you have gluten digestion issues, so I say no. White rice, white potatoes. So let me tell you guys what I ate yesterday, because I was trying to mix it up, because I'm used to eating fruit and vegetables, so there's no fruit or vegetables, because those ferment. No, nothing in your water, plain black iced tea is fine, plain black diluted coffee, which I hate. I love a dark roast, so I had to go and get a light roast coffee at Panera, put half water in it. It tastes disgusting, but I wanted to look happy. So I tried to mix it up, and what I did is I ate 4 times that day, and I fasted in the morning, and then I spread my meals out 3 hours basically in between, and I tried to mix up how many different ways could I make potatoes and rice and make them look and feel different. So I can actually do egg yolks but not white, so I did 3 egg yolks in the morning and then hash browns, I made my own hash browns just with salt, pepper. Oh, you can do olive oil and coconut oil too, so it's protein and fat, but no, it's and there's some carbs, but it's got to be digestible carbs. So potatoes and rice are your friend. By the way, both those foods get a bad rap if you have stomach issues. Potatoes and rice are your friend. So I did hash browns, and it's only 1,200 calories. That was the other thing. It's half of what I'm used to eating, so I was hungry. And then my second meal, I did chicken and rice, olive oil and salt again, boiled chicken breast. And then my third meal, I did boiled fish. And then instead of hash browns, I did boiled red baby potatoes. Different color, look different. By this time, you're oh. You could smash them and fry them in a frying pan with little olive oil and salt. Tastes like French fries. Don't go get French fries, but that could work. And then my last meal, I think I did beef and a little flank steak and rice again. And then just plain black iced tea. So it's that exciting. And you're really hungry by the end because you don't want to eat another piece of meat. It's fine if I eat that much meat in a day anyways, but I eat with so many other things. You're just kind of I'd rather just not. You'd just rather skip it. But you want to get a good results from the test. So let me tell you what's in here, the kit. I have a client that gave me permission to share her results today too, so I'm going to go through what this looks like. Hers was negative though actually, but so you'll get this kit. I'll pass it around if you want. And there's a book in here, just like how to prep and kind of how to do all this. So you could get it and sit on it for a couple weeks if you wanted to, which actually is what I did because I wanted to bring this to you guys today. So I wanted to like bring you the kit and take it. And then you got all these nice little like foil, basically like balloons. The test is totally painless. So like I will be fasting close to 16 hours before I take this test tomorrow morning. You have to be awake for an hour and moving, but not vigorously, and you can't sleep an hour before the test, which really sucks because you just want to wake up and start the thing. But you can't because that affects hydrogen levels. Sleeping affects hydrogen levels, which is like crazy. So you just want to be up and like doing things, you know, like whatever. I'll be making brunch tomorrow and fasting, so that'll be fun. So I'll just like smell the food. But and then about every 15 to 20 minutes, and you can't no chapstick, no lipstick, no lotion. You don't want to affect like the test. You'll be breathing into a tube essentially every 15 or 20 minutes. You can have a little bit of water in between, but nothing else. That's it. Don't take your vitamins that morning either. Just wait till later. So you do that for 3 hours. And that's all you do. And then you send the results in. So I got prescription lactulose, so this is like what I'll be, it's just sugar, like sweet, sugary basically. And if any of you guys have done this in GI, this can sometimes cause like diarrhea for people if you take it. It never has for me, it just makes me really bloated and feel horrible, but usually it goes away within 24 hours for sure. So talk to me Monday morning, I'll have much more energy. But the cool thing about this is that like I could have easily gotten a lactulose script, but I got a script from the doctor online there. You just fill out the stuff and you check if you want glucose or lactulose, and they send a prescription and you fill it. I like literally just went to Hometown Pharmacy and filled it. It's cheap, so it's pretty easy. I'll pass this around if anybody wants to look at it. It's like big. You can see I tried to open the box and ripped it too, because so I somehow have to duct tape that and get it back. I don't want to spend too much time on all the numbers, but I'm going to talk to you about what test results may come back and how we read them or what they look like, and I'm going to pass these results around even though they're negative. So let's go through the 3 gases in a little bit more detail, and then I'll show you the results. So the first gas measured is hydrogen, and that's produced when bacteria consume sugar. So hydrogen levels are considered abnormal when the rise in your test is, so everything's measured in parts per million here. When the rise in your test is 20 parts per million from wherever your baseline was. So if your baseline was 4, and you hit 24 or more at any time during the test, usually it goes like this, then you're positive, basically. Methane is the second bacteria measured. Methane is actually technically not bacteria, it's called archaea, which I won't get into today, but we're measuring that. Methane levels are considered abnormal if they reach over 10 at any point in the test. My last test that I did was 110, so it's high. We also decide the number of treatment of antibiotics or herbal, or I'm going to talk about elemental diet today, based on what your numbers were. 1 2-week round of antibiotics brings your parts per million down about 30, give or take, right? So if I have 110, that tells me how many rounds that I need, if that makes sense, yeah.
What's the antibiotics?
The antibiotic, I'll go through that, yeah. I'll tell you the antibiotic that should be used, actually. Like that's not always the one that people walk away with, but so over 10 parts per million. What's interesting is latest research has shown that you are methane positive if you are pretty significantly constipated. If your number is even between 3 and 9, you are positive. So even a mark of 3 is like positive. So it used to be 10, and now we're saying for people going into it with a lot of constipation, 3 to 9. So that's interesting too. So, so elevated methane levels are associated with severe constipation. And the number generally is associated with the severity of your symptoms. But not always. I've had some people that are like, and they, they may have other things going on in their body too, but I've seen some people with a methane level of 30 or 40 that are like really in bad shape, and other people, maybe not over 100, but other people in the 60s or 70s that are like not too bad off, you know, and so all of our bodies are different, so, but typically the number correlates with how severe your symptoms are. The third gas measured, which this is the gas that's in this test that people won't have access to otherwise, is hydrogen sulfide. And so that's produced when sulfate-reducing organisms eat the hydrogen. All these bacteria they're all connected with each other, and so you can have also a mixed methane and hydrogen test because methane eats hydrogen. If you have a mixed methane and hydrogen test, we treat the methane because methane eats hydrogen, so that's like the predominant one. Or based on your symptoms, we might decide what course of antibiotics to do based on how your symptoms correlate with what your test is. You have a positive hydrogen sulfide test if it reaches over 3 at any point during the test. So methane's over 10 generally, hydrogen sulfide over 3, hydrogen is over 20, whatever your baseline was, so from your starting. So that's why it's important to do the prep diet to make sure that you're not getting false positive, false negative. But all the gases kind of interact with each other. Okay, so let me tell you about what a result might look like, and I'll pass this out, and then let me go to the antibiotics there's multiple options to treat it. So what you'll do is you'll get this back where it'll show a line graph of your test, and it'll tell you in the beginning like you're positive, you're negative, or you know what it is, what your baseline samples are, and everything. And so this patient was negative, but you'll see if there's like a large rise, and that's how you'll see it like graphically basically, and then you'll kind of know, and it explains what I just said, all the numbers and the positive, negative. If you need to take a picture of this, you absolutely can.
Is that the
But
one?
I just want that back.
Is that the results from this test?
Yes.
Or from the doctor?
From that test. Yep. I wanted to show you, if you ever order this box, like what it looks like what you get back. The email usually within 7 to 10 days after, so. Okay, yeah.
Just so I understand the theory behind, these 3 gases are bad, is that correct? If you find them, that means that something's going on?
Correct. You shouldn't have that much gas
Why
in your
would
body.
you worry about trying to eliminate other sources of these gases? If you find them in your gut at any time, no matter what you're eating, wouldn't that be bad?
Wouldn't what be bad?
Supposedly this test is, you have to do a prep in order to remove other potential sources of the gas, is that the idea?
To remove, because we want to know what happens when you eat something that kicks the gases in, which by the way is like all the foods except for like chicken, rice, potatoes, and fish, you know, that I said. And so most of us are eating, hopefully, more variety, you know, foods and that. But that's why people are symptomatic, is because they're eating these like quote unquote fairly normal diets and having issues. The idea is to reduce the gas levels so we see what happens after you are stimulated with like a food, or lactulose is what we give people.
So if I understand you correctly, then you could also have these gases through normal diet, which wouldn't be those gases would not be created by bacteria.
Correct. Right. Here's the other thing. I'm certified in low FODMAP diet, right? And so I can help people with this, but often if people come into me with gut issues with any of this stuff, I know it's hard because you want to feel better tomorrow. I could give you the low FODMAP diet and you'll probably feel really good, like 70 or 80% better, but it doesn't fix the root cause of what's going on. And so what I really want you to do is get a diagnosis, get treated, and then do the low FODMAP diet after. Here's the other reason. You don't want to eat a low FODMAP or this is low fermentation diet, like kind of what I'm doing, except for it's not that bad. By the way, when you get a meal plan from me with low FODMAP diet, there's tons of fruits and vegetables and tons of stuff in there, and it's not as restrictive as you think. It's not like what I'm talking about, what I'm eating today. We want to bring the bacteria out and like nuke those suckers with antibiotics or herbal or elemental diet on purpose. You don't want to eat a low FODMAP diet while you're on antibiotics. Ideally, you can, but the antibiotics then don't work as well because the bacteria are hiding because you're not doing anything to piss them off. So the idea during the antibiotic regimen for 2 weeks is to take, and I'm making this antibiotic assumption because that's generally my preference, but I'll talk to you about the other treatment modules, is to do the antibiotics, bring those bacteria out, eat normally per se. You might feel crappy and kill them off. You might feel crappy while they're dying off, by the way, too. Some people have some die-off symptoms where the bloating's almost like worse for a little bit, but again, it's just like, it's like a war in there, right? You know? And then after the end of the regimen, then you would switch to a low FODMAP diet and try to like
So
hide those
basically
bacteria.
eating the things that you know piss off your guts.
On purpose for 2 weeks, yeah. Or I tell people eat how you've always eaten because people don't, you don't know what's going on. So just do whatever, like go paper sandwich or yogurt or whatever it is, you know. Just eat how you normally would. I don't want you to mess that up because if we hide the bacteria, we can't kill them. So you'll do that, then you'll do low FODMAP diet. Some people, I've done like an antibiotic regimen and then we do an herbal regimen because it's a little bit gentler. Some people can't get an antibiotic prescription. It's too expensive. I'll tell you what the antibiotic is and that's why. And so they do herbal instead, and that is a 4 to 6 week treatment protocol instead of 2 because it's just not as heavy, I guess. From a diet perspective, or from a treatment perspective, it's antibiotics, it's an herbal regimen, which is usually, berberine with HCl, hydrochloric acid, and then usually allicin, which is a garlic derivative, or atrantil, which has peppermint oil in it, or sometimes neem or oregano oil. Those are all antifungals too. So the second option is an herbal antibiotic regimen, which by the way, you can do both, but not at the same time. You could do a course of antibiotics and then do herbals. That's what I did last year, because I'm like, it's not gonna hurt anything. And I know based on my GI map, which I'll go through that today, they have so much bacteria in there that I don't really have a risk of like taking them out. Like, you know, you don't want low bacteria either, so I see those with people too. That's not good either. That's when you need a probiotic. You can have gut dysbiosis and not have SIBO and just have a messed up leaky gut because you don't have enough bacteria in there, so that's, you know, bad too. The third treatment option from for SIBO is something called the elemental diet. I've been on the edge of doing it a couple times. I never have because I didn't know if I could make it through. And it is a liquid shake diet for 14 days. They've really come a long way into what they taste like. So I have had them. You can get some results from like doing a 72-hour thing or like trying it for a week. But to get the results of killing those bacteria, you really want to get at least past the 10-day mark. So I have never done it. Physician's Elemental formula is the best tasting one, and that's probably the one. And I can get it for you if you ever need it. But I don't like to go there with people because that like messes with your quality of life that you have to do that for 2 weeks. I mean, it's really hard. Like your energy's low, has, you know, vitamins and minerals and all that stuff in there, but it's like not as many calories. It's just boring. I don't know. I think I'd have a hard time doing that for more than 24 hours. I think that would be really hard. So I try not to ever do that with people. I've done it once with somebody. So, because she was just like, I'm ready, and she didn't want to think about food anymore. And after a while, she just had really developed a poor relationship with food too, because she was afraid of it. She was like afraid to eat. So I'm like, then now we're ready to do this. You know, just do this instead. So, 2-week antibiotic regimen, 4 to 6 herbal regimen, or the elemental diet, or like the 3 treatment protocols for it. My preference is antibiotics, even though I tend to really approach things a little bit more holistically, but I think it really just works the best, and the research behind it works the best. However, yeah, if you can't get access to the antibiotics, they cost too much, you don't have a medical provider, you can totally do an herbal regimen, and lots of people have really good luck with that. Okay.
Do you have that written down anywhere, Sarah?
Huh.
That recipe? Do you have those recipes for the herbal thing written anywhere? Like what you just saw?
It would be, I wouldn't want you to like come up with that yourself, but like I can give it to you and I can talk to you too about it, just like what it is. Because I have to look at like, I would just want to do a good assessment with you to determine like dosage and what that would be. SIBOinfo.com, it's on there though.
Okay, and
On
so
Allison's,
those authors that you would like.
yep, Allison Seebecker, it's on her website, so.
SIBO.com.
Yep, SIBOinfo.com.
Okay.
SIBO info. Gold standard antibiotic of choice for hydrogen is rifaximin, and rifaximin alone. It is crazy expensive, and it is not covered by lots of insurance. If you get it covered at all, you are lucky. It is better than it was before. Mercy never covered mine. Once they covered it, but I had to go and like present in front of a doc team and like do a big thing and like fight with them a little bit, and I came out in tears and it wasn't worth it and I'll never do it again. And they covered it and I still spent $2,000. So, and I needed 3 rounds and I couldn't afford. So that was one of the times that I treated it once I could not afford to treat it 3 times and I didn't, and I still felt crappy and it sucked. But I have some good news with that. So at one point when I was doing this, I needed 3 rounds, and so it was gonna be about $9,000 to treat it, and first when I covered it, I thought, okay, I can buy a car or like get some meds and feel better. A lot of times when you go to GI or the doctor's office, they'll give you another broad spectrum antibiotic like Cipro or Flagyl. You may feel better after those because they're an antibiotic, so they're knocking down bacteria. But they're broad spectrum systemic antibiotic, and you don't need that. So rifaximin just literally sits in your gut and treats your gut bacteria, but nothing else. The cool thing about rifaximin also is that people really have any side effects from it at all, other than this die-off, because it's not a systemic antibiotic. So if you have hydrogen, if you test positive for hydrogen alone, rifaximin is the antibiotic that you want. If you can look for GoodRx and all that stuff, by the way, I did all that too, it's still like thousands of dollars. So if you can't get it covered, you get a paper script, you contact me, and I can get you a Canadian pharmacy, and you'll pay $160 for it. It'll take 3 weeks to get here though, so that's the sucky part. So that's what I've done for years, I just get a script and do it myself. So it is possible. I'm in support groups all over the world, people are doing it. They do a little health history with you, it's great. So, but as you guys know, the way we do health insurance and meds here as opposed to Canada is totally different, and so that's literally the price of the meds is $170, it's not $3,000. So there's hope that way. If you have hydrogen sulfide, rifaximin, it's the same dose. I won't go through the dosage, it's 550 milligrams 3 times a day. But, and bismuth, which is like Pepto-Bismol. I prefer to use like a kaopectate or like a natural alternative, because Pepto-Bismol has like red dye in it and some other stuff, and then some like artificial sugars, which, hello, you're trying to fix that. But whatever, for a couple weeks, if you take Pepto-Bismol, it's okay. I like kaopectate. I forget what the dose on that, I think it's 2,000 milligrams for 10 days. So hydrogen sulfide, which by the way is the least common of the 3, but that's what the antibiotic treatment is for that combination. Methane is the toughest to treat. Methane, do not leave with just a script for rifaximin. If you do, it helps people about 25% of the time, but the relapse rate is about 60 days. So that means maybe you feel better for 2 months and then you don't, and then you gotta go through this whole thing with your insurance and stuff all over again. Rifaximin and neomycin is the gold standard treatment for methane SIBO. There is a nationwide shortage in neomycin right now, and they're not making it anymore, so that's interesting. That's been happening for about 3 years though, so they've been studying metronidazole as a secondary combination antibiotic with rifaximin with amazing results. It's called Flagyl in the US, but it's metronidazole. We use it in the vet world. It's cheap and like easily covered, and they hand it out like candy at GI, so it's not a big deal to get a metronidazole or a Flagyl prescription. So then you take rifaximin for 2 weeks, 3 times a day, and the metronidazole is 3 times a day, usually 250 milligrams, sometimes 500 for 10 days. So that's the like gold standard for methane if you have that. Herbal I went through, and then elemental diet. So that's the treatment piece. Does anybody have questions about that test? Oh, here's let me pass this out too. This is like the prep diet, and like what, and this is just from one place. That one still just says white bread. Like I said, I don't personally have to use that, but.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The antibiotic treatment, I've always been told that antibiotics damages your probiotic biome. So isn't it kind of counterproductive to be given a whole bunch of antibiotics, which then wipes out your large intestine as far as that, and then you've got to rebuild your large intestine, and in the meantime, you back to troubles with your small intestine.
So yes, but not with rifaximin, because rifaximin is specifically used to treat the overgrowth and the bad bacteria in your gut.
So it doesn't affect your colon?
No, I mean, I suppose if you were taking it like every day for a long, I mean, yeah, you could, I suppose, but, that is not supposed to mess with your microbiome. What can mess with your microbiome, if you leave with the incorrect antibiotic, like maybe Cipro, that can mess with it. And like, I did Cipro a couple times before I knew what I was supposed to be doing and before anybody else knew, and I felt worse, and I didn't feel
Feel
better,
better.
actually, after, like, I just felt bad. I don't know.
I felt better for about 3 days.
Yeah, 3 days, right.
I felt better for about 3 days,
But what you
and
do,
then it
like,
got worse.
me on that, yes, so it kinda like can come back to bite you.
I feel like flagell's a hard one too, though, isn't it? Like, we hear a lot of our patients complain about flagell. So I don't-
Yeah, I don't know, I had good results with Flagyl. One of the times that I did Flagyl with rifaximin, I got a little bit of a rash on my face, like a little itchy, and I knew that's what it was, so I just kind of pushed through, because it wasn't horrible, but it was
Yeah.
like irritating.
I don't know, but like GI wise, I feel like people complain about that.
Really?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe it depends on the dose too.
Well, I think in the OB/GYN world, maybe the dosing is different than what it is.
Yeah, it might be, I think that is 500 3 times a day. I think this one, because it's a secondary antibiotic, is 250, but,
Okay.
I generally have heard people that it's well tolerated. Flagyl, though, like metronidazole, you wanna, the rifaximin I take on an empty stomach and I'm fine. Metronidazole, you wanna take with some food. And I think that makes a big difference. Just with like other meds, you guys know this, even like multivitamins, it's like if you don't take them with food, sometimes you get nauseous or you're a little off, especially if they're a really good vitamin. So metronidazole for sure can feel like that. You can feel like your stomach's like, I felt like my stomach is like empty, kind of, like a pit in my stomach, kind of, not painful, but just like I need to eat all the time. That's what it felt
Well,
like.
it's interesting to me about the nausea thing though, because, you know, now I just had a repeat scope done. My
Yeah.
ulcers are gone,
Yeah,
like completely gone, but I feel the most nauseous I've ever felt.
isn't it interesting?
And I never had it with pregnancy or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know what is
Yeah.
for that, but.
Nausea for me and like the fatigue, and I think maybe it's just I got used to the bloating, and I think one of the low points in my life was last year. I told a couple of you this who I work with, was none of my pants fit, and I put on some weight a little bit with menopause too, but not a lot, but like 10 pounds. And I had to buy maternity pants at Kohl's. 48 years old and buying maternity pants because I literally was so big in front, and I'm a small person. I was so big in front I couldn't. I remember just like bawling in the dressing room of Kohl's, like I can't. You know,
And then-
emotionally that really messes with you.
Yeah.
And I had to buy maternity pants, and I literally had to wear maternity pants to work every day, and I just wore like a different shirt over them or whatever because it's the only thing that would fit me that's comfortable. It is not what you want to be buying when you are almost 50 years old and done having babies.
And blue jeans are
And
extremely
it really messes with
uncomfortable.
your head. It really messes, like, so, the emotional piece of all of this is like, it's a lot. And so, that's why honestly, as a therapist, I love the combination of working with this with people because it really, I was definitely like depressed for a while when I had this. Because there's just, every day's the same. Every day's the same and it didn't get better. And I've been in and out of this for 20 years, and I can still barely talk about it without crying, you know, it's just a lot. So, yeah, know that, a lot of times it's chronic, just like other, I mean, if you have an autoimmune disease, that's chronic, right? And so, and by the way, I work with people with autoimmune disease all the time, and I usually can get like 70 to 8% symptom relief. And it's amazing, and some people are like, I don't even feel like I'm an autoimmune disease anymore, but it's still, you know, it's gonna ebb and flow throughout your life. If you have celiac, you have celiac. If you have Crohn's, you have Crohn's. That's just, you know, it is. There's also comorbidities of some of these too. Diverticulitis would be one. If you have diverticulitis, low FODMAP diet would be amazing for that. You may have diverticulitis and you may have SIBO too, though. You could have, you know, you could have both or one or the other. But just know this stuff can wear on you, and so don't wait. Like, just dig in and try to figure out what's going on, because it's going to take longer than you want already, like just to figure out what's going on to kind of fix it. And it really is both physically and mentally debilitating. So it's hard. Let me talk about the GI map a little bit as a third test option. That one's my favorite. So my husband the other day was like, Friday night I had 3 GI map results that I was analyzing for people, and he was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm analyzing poop like all night. Like, that's essentially what I'm doing. So he was like, oh, I do that too, you know, so I'm gonna read through like an interpretation result of like what I would give you after you did a GI map. So GI map is a stool test. My knowledge, we don't have those in GI yet either. I've had a couple of my patients who are in Madison who have really good GI docs say, please get it, but I don't have access to it. I don't know why they don't have access to it, but I can get it for you. So I can order it at the doctor's office. I'm not gonna you're just gonna walk in, I'm just gonna order it for you though. I really wanna go through like a good assessment and plan. But let me tell you what you find out if you do a GI map test. Ideally, I really love people to do, because there's a lot of times maybe other things going on. Maybe you have SIBO, maybe you also have like H. pylori or E. coli or Campylobacter or like something else, C. diff, like something else going on in your gut. And so you may have other gut-related symptoms that aren't SIBO. And so ideally, I like it when people do a GI map and a SIBO test if you're having like results. But it's like $600 if, you know, I mean, if it's not covered. This I think is like $350, $400. This is the priciest of the tests, but it tells you a lot. This is mine, so I can pass mine around if you want, but it'll go through bacterial pathogens, so pathogenic bacteria, so bad bacteria that you're not supposed to have any of. Do you have any of those in your symptoms? So C. diff is in here, salmonella is in here. So like, I didn't have any of that. Parasitic pathogens like Cryptosporidium. People that have lived in Milwaukee for a chunk of their life were in their mid-50s. I see Cryptosporidium was because there was a period of time in Milwaukee where that was a big deal. Giardia, so like actually the last time I did my test, I had a touch of Giardia, so I treated that. Like I didn't know that was in there though, you know, so I'm like, why not, let's fix that. And then there was viral pathogens in there. There's like norovirus and some other things in there. So it'll tell you kind of what's harboring in with your stool test. There's not much prep for this one, so it's pretty cool. And you can take it home and basically do the stool sample and you send it out. You mix it in a liquid and send it out, so it's like annoying, but it's, you know, painless. You don't, there's a few things you can't take before it or a few things you can't do, but nothing like that SIBO test, like nothing. So it's not that big a deal to do. H. pylori is in here, which is super common. If you have ulcers, the likelihood that you have H. pylori is pretty high usually, because that's what it feels like. Then they measure normal bacterial flora. So there's certain bacteria you want in your gut, and we all have in there, but it measures if you have too much of something. So too much of even good stuff isn't great either, because that's an imbalance. So there's lactobacillus in here. There's tons of different types of bacteria. So like I was high for 2 of the 10, like really high here. So I used to do this in combination with my SIBO test last year to figure out where my gut was at currently, because I hadn't tested in a while because I felt fine. There's ratios and numbers, and like when I analyze this, it takes me about 2 hours of test, and I go through kind of all the pieces too, and so I can go through it all with you. There's dysbiotic, like overgrowth bacteria. Again, strep is in here. So if you've ever had strep, most of us have had a strep infection. You treat it with antibiotics and then you feel fine, everything goes great. But if you are harboring that and you still have that in your body at a certain level, that's an issue too. You can have it at a normal level, just showing that you had strep at one point and was treated, and it's probably not that big of a deal. But if it's still harboring in your system, that can be an issue too. There's autoimmune triggers in here. So it's great to like test for a couple autoimmune triggers, so that I wanted to know, I've done about 4 GI maps in my life, but I really wanted to know if I had something autoimmune going on. And so there's other pieces in there. This will test for fungus and yeast. So there's another sort of sister diagnosis to SIBO called SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. Super hard to totally test for actually. But this will tell you basically if you have candida, which is pretty common. So when I treat people for candida, a lot of times they're having yeast infections. I look in their tongue and you can see that they have yeast. A lot of times they have like dandruff. There's other skin issues, a lot of times skin issues, right? I don't do a candida elimination diet with people until they're treated for candida either. Same thing, let's get a candida test. Let's treat you with an antifungal or something over the counter, whatever. Let's do that for a while. Make sure that we've treated it. Then let's do a low candida diet. So I do that with people too. So fungus and yeast, viruses, or a couple other viruses are in here, like Epstein-Barr, which is connected with other autoimmune conditions. That's a whole other topic, but a lot of the root cause of autoimmune conditions is harbored viruses that weren't treated. And so if you can figure out what viruses are sitting in your body, it's super helpful. Worms?
No.
Test for worms. So if you can see them, then you know you have worms, right? if any of you have ever had that. It's disgusting, never had it. But, yeah, you, normally if you have worms, you know you do, but you may not. Maybe there's some little ones in there. And then there's digestion health markers, elastase, there's a secretory IgA, which is, mine's always like really high, and so that's an immune response. That means that my body is having such an immune response to whatever food or something going in my body that is causing basically the feeling of an autoimmune flare. So that's, when I flare, that's what it feels like to me, like my whole body, everything's broken. Calprotectin is an inflammatory marker that we use in GI stool tests, and if your calprotectin is high, then we know that you have what we would call leaky gut, which is a whole nother talk also, but that means that your closed gap junctions in your gut are, all the food is like seeping through basically, and that we want to give you stuff to be able to rebuild your gut mucosa, so that I might give you supplements for that. That can take months to years though also if you've had the condition for a long time, but that they will test in GI, and you can just get like a calprotectin test. Typically, people who are methane dominant, SIBO, or constipation don't have any issues with calprotectin. It's usually if you have diarrhea and you're just like, everything flows through your body and can't absorb anything, then usually your gut's a mess. The other piece at the end that I really like on this is that it tests your antibiotic resistance genes and phenotypes. So it'll tell you what antibiotics that you're resistant to, especially with the treatment for H. pylori. So I love that, because it'll tell you, so we do, and it's not all of them, but like amoxicillin is on here, all the tetracyclics, Cipro. I love that, because that'll tell you if there's an antibiotic that you shouldn't bother ever taking because it won't work for you, because you are resistant to it. So, that's what the GI map is. The GI map is, there's a couple options. The one I like is through Diagnostic Solutions Laboratory. You can Google them. You won't be able to order it yourself, but you can at least go through and kind of see what it is. After you do a GI map, I will give you a 2-page printout on kind of like each of those categories, what's in those and what we're gonna do, and then kind of a treatment plan following that. So I can read through just like a sample one that I did recently. So she had no pathogens, no H. pylori. She had overgrowth of 3 commensal bacteria, and so I decided to do berberine and oil of oregano here, and Saccharomyces boulardii, which is a yeast-based probiotic, like helps fight yeast. She had overgrowth of 3 bad bacteria in here, and I'll tell you the cause of where we think it came from too. So a lot of times overgrowth from bacteria is from low stomach acid, which we get as we get older too. And so if you don't have enough acid to kill those bacteria, they're just gonna populate in there because you have given them sort of the opportunity to do that. So that's where the whole like lemon water thing, or digestive bitters, or apple cider vinegar comes from, like doing that before you have a meal, because it's increasing your stomach acid so you can digest your food better. She had low elastase, but she had her gallbladder out, and I knew that. So a lot of times people have had their gallbladder out have digestion issues, and so we needed to rebuild that too. So she had an inability to digest fats, and so that's what happens when you have low elastase. So as a result of that, one of my assumptions is that she probably had decreased pancreatic output, so then we looked at that. I added ox bile for her because that is a enzyme that we use specifically to digest fats in particular. So anybody who's had gallbladder surgery should probably be on some ox bile like regularly. It sounds disgusting, right? She had high IgA also, likely from reactions to food sensitivities. So what I did with her was a GI map, a SIBO test, and a food sensitivity test. She just like knocked it all out of the park, and I put all those tests together, and now I know what to do with her based on kind of all that data. So the data piece is important. Turned out for sure, gluten, dairy, eggs, she had like 6 or 7 things that she was eating like every day. And so that's probably what was going on with her body. Her calprotectin was high too, meaning that she had some inflammation too. So like my treatment plan with her was low FODMAP meal plan minus her IgG sensitivities, gluten-free 100%, add vitamin D. For her, she needed B12. So she was getting B12 and iron injections because she wasn't absorbing anything. So then that depleted like all of her other things. And then a few other some digestive enzymes and stuff too. She also was positive for candida. So I did a low FODMAP diet with her with particularly low sugar and starch. And then I added some oregano in there too. So that's what the GI map is. So all of these are really connected, right? But I want to be clear today on just like when you might do each test or who might be appropriate, and if you're not sure, you can ask me, but IBS Smart, Trio Smart for SIBO. SIBO, 70% of the time is the root cause of IBS, of all 3 types. The IBS Smart you'd only do if you have diarrhea or mixed, because that's like the food poisoning piece. The GI map, anybody can do, really. It's like pricey, a little bit of an investment, but I think it's great because it shows lots of other things, and I like to combine all that data together. I often do food sensitive, anybody that comes in with pretty significant GI issues, I always do food sensitivity testing too, so those are about $200 or a little over. You don't always have to ever repeat those either, you can if you want. I've done a few maybe over 10 years, but as I have decreased the inflammation in my body, my food sensitivities have gone down too. So I used to have 30, now I have 5. So it's awesome. There's really only a few things that I'm like truly sensitive to. I have lots of issues digestively with certain things. So for example, I like to explain this as a difference. So people come back and they're like, I got my food sensitivity test and cauliflower's not on that. And every time I eat cauliflower, I get sick. I'm like, well, you're not sensitive to cauliflower, you're just having a hard time digesting it, but it feels the same, right? Eggs are a low FODMAP food. I put eggs all over somebody's low FODMAP meal plan. They might say when I eat eggs, I feel sick. Well, then they're probably sensitive to eggs, but it's not. So it's like a digestion issue versus an actual sensitivity or immune reaction, but a lot of times they feel the same, but it's 2 different things. So that's why before I do custom meal plans for people, I like to get your food sensitivities. I like to ask you what you like and don't like to eat too, so we'll spend time creating recipes together. And then I can decide kind of what template or whatever to use.